development. uh, and things that are coming up as well. And then also, we're going to be covering some suggested or recommended best practices. If we have enough time, we'll be going into the applicant perspective. So I will be going into the actual registry to show you the system. And then that also is a perfect opportunity for you to log into your account, whether it's on your phone or your computer, so that you can follow along and get very familiar. And then we'll be sharing some resources and ways in which your participants from your county or you yourselves can get a hold of us. We have plenty of support to provide. So yes, all of that is additional. And then we do have some new videos that we've developed specifically for stipend administrators. So I will be showing you that at the very, very end. Also super random. I just keep seeing people that have shared their screen and I'm like, oh my God, I just want to shout you out. But so Noemi, Jennifer, Amanda, Iris, Leah, hello. But nice to meet everybody that maybe I haven't met if you're brand new and it's your first time seeing my face. Otherwise, most of you already know me. My name is Angel Duran Ramirez, and I'm the program manager with the registry. I've been with the registry for almost 3 years now. It's going to be 3 years in November. And initially started with the integration project across the state. And then I started supporting with stipend module, became the primary lead for that. I do also run a stipend program in the county of Los Angeles, specifically for family, friend, and neighbor providers. And now my role has expanded into overseeing everything that is programmatic and programmatic support across the state as well. So that includes the pathway module, which we're expanding with some additional counties. And then also the news of a new launch, which is coming next week, which I'll be sharing about briefly because it is directly related to the stipend module, which is our professional growth advising module, amongst other things. And then we always think that it's awesome for you to meet some additional people from the team that are always doing work on the back end to support you, but you maybe don't necessarily get to interact with them. So I'll pass it on to Estefania so that she can introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I am Estefania. I am the program assistant and I help support the registry at large along with operations as well. I have been supporting the FFN admin for a while now, and this year I will be a stipend administrator.
Woo. Thank you, Estefania. Okay, so now we're going to be going into some of the actual content. So most of you that have been using the stipend module for some time now, I know a lot of you are going into your third or fourth year. Some of you are going into your second year. Some of you, it's your first year utilizing it. And there are various different benefits to utilizing the stipend module. Number one is that all data for applications lives in one place, which is that component of the registry. And as administrators, you're able to access that. You're able to access all the information from a participant's application, which includes some of their personal information, contact information, employment record, the actual request that they're making to receive a stipend, and then any of the documents that they've uploaded, along with all verified data that is part of their profile, which also would include their education and training report. And it also is the place where individuals can upload items that you may need for your stipend program, such as supplemental forms, including employment verification forms, W-9s, and anything else. Also, another benefit, particularly for the participants, is that it is a simplified application process. Long gone are the days of individuals having to fill out, a packet of 50, 20 pages, including everything from writing their name, their registry ID, etc. And the actual application is just them verifying that everything is up to date on their profile. And then when it comes to the application itself, it's about 3 to 4 questions, depending on how you've set it up. So it's fairly easy to utilize, and most individuals that have been using it for some time have gotten pretty familiar with it. Another benefit is that you can also have multiple stipend programs. So as you have gone in to see, maybe if you've submitted a test application, you've seen that multiple counties actually have more than one stipend program. Originally, it started to support the AB 212 and then that transitioning into workforce pathways. But now we have counties that are utilizing it or other stipend programs that are provided maybe through local funds, or some individuals are also utilizing it for the new EETDG Funding, so there's always different ways in which you can utilize that. And we have a couple of other counties that are also utilizing it to implement some of their compensation programs. The other benefit is that you have access to multiple different reports. Through the stipend module, you have access to 5 of them, which are pretty comprehensive in terms of the application and other data that is part of the individual's registry profile. And then if you are providing stipends via the Workforce Pathways funding, there is a report that is a compilation of data fields from all of the other reports that you can utilize to do some of your end of year reporting. Another additional benefit now is that there is going to be an integration with our new upcoming professional growth advising module. So for the past 2 years, we've been working really hard to launch this new module in which individuals are going to be able to create professional growth plans. And it is directly integrated with the stipend module. So that should be going live sometime over this weekend or on Monday. But I believe it is going to be over the weekend. Through that, now individuals will be able to, if you require it and you put it in your setup, which will send some additional information once that it's fully live. And if it's something that you're interested in potentially utilizing for your stipend program for this year, or if you want to just strategize and do that next year, we can support with that. But there's going to be a section in the setup where you'll be able to select whether individuals are going to be required to complete a professional growth plan in the registry. And so then individuals will be able to just directly do that in the registry. And on your end, when you're reviewing applications, you will be able to run a report for individuals that have submitted a professional growth plan. And additionally, right under the hyperlink where you usually see the education and training report, you also will see a PDF version of that professional growth plan. So that is very, very exciting because, like I said, we've been working very hard with that. So we're very excited to see that. And we know that it's going to support a lot of your programs. Another benefit is also that we do continuous development on the registry at large, but also the stipend module. We've taken a lot of the suggestions that individuals have provided. We've added additional questions. And I'll mention a little bit more some of the additional developments that we've done specifically after the previous webinar that we held. But yeah, if you ever have any ideas of how you think anything in the registry or just in general, the professional growth advising module once it's launched, or the stipend module or anything else that you utilize, please let us know because we do take note of that. And then when possible, we implement those developments. Also, hello, Jank. Just I know I'm like seeing people pop up, so I'm like, hi. And then last thing is we also do provide a lot of support. We do have support for participants Monday through Friday, which I'll mention a little bit more towards the end of the actual webinar, but then also for US stipend administrators. I've been the primary support for all of you, whether it's been meeting, regularly throughout the fiscal year via email, etc., or through these webinars. Now support is going to be expanded because there's some minor changes with our staff, but there is going to be 2 individuals that are going to be now providing the support for the stipend module, obviously along with myself. And also, if at any point I talk too fast, just let me know. I do have a tendency to just go 100 miles per hour. Not while I'm driving, but just when I'm speaking. But now to go into the actual content of the stipend module. So the setup, when you go to your stipend administration on the left side toolbar and you click on that, you will automatically be routed to your features within the stipend module. If you are running more than one stipend and you have access to multiple, then you'll be able to see a list. And when you click on whichever stipend you want to edit, then you'll be routed to the images that you're seeing on the screen, which we also will see once we go into the actual registry. But your stipend setup, the way that I think about it, is usually where you customize some components of your stipend application. And so within that, within that, there's different features. Usually you'll be able to see that if it's like your first time that you're launching a new program, or if you have like another one that you're opening up, a lot of these fields would say incomplete. If you're just editing for the new fiscal year, it will say complete. You would just have to go into each one of those. But these are all the different components that you would be updating, or taking a look at, or just reviewing in general to make sure that it's all up to date so that you can launch for the new fiscal year. And some updates and upcoming updates that I do want to mention as well. We have added a new question in the pathways, that essentially, because we ended up, finding out that CDSS was asking for this information. So we added a question that is essentially asking individuals if they are enrolled in a degree program, and it will usually give individuals the option to select whether it's an AA or a BA, and if it's other, then it opens up a box so that they can enter, an additional description. However, just be aware that this question is only applicable to any pathways that have to do with college credit. So if that is completing college credit or having received a degree. In the applications filter component, so that would be in this section. We also have added a brand new filter, and this was added actually last year. We did go over that during the last webinar, but some people had questions about it. So we added a application filter for job titles. So now you can actually select what job titles are eligible for your stipend program. And it's essentially all of the job titles that are in the registry. So if you do have parameters around that, you can select the ones that you want to be able to apply. Within that, just sometimes if individuals don't have their profile up to date, the system may not let them apply, but they just need to update their profile. Some of the reports also, the order has been rearranged for the data fields. So you may have noticed that, or not all the data is still the same. There were just some minor additions to the applicant's report at the very end. But all of the data is the same. Everything was just rearranged to kind of make more sense of things. Because some stuff was kind of in different places, so it just made sense to kind of group certain groups of information together. Another update that we've done is there are additional denial and withdrawal reasons that we've added. So as you're going through the process of processing your applications, you may notice that now the list is a little bit more extensive. If you ever do have um, any suggestions for additional denial or withdrawal reasons, you can feel free to let us know. Within that, we just try to make sure that everything is still general to some extent so that other individuals that are utilizing the module across the state can also utilize that reason. And then, as I mentioned, the other update is the integration with the professional growth advising module, which at some point after the launch, we are going to be sending another invitation just to kind of introduce everybody to it so that you can see what the functionalities are, because there's going to be two components to it as we do the launch in different phases. The initial phase is primarily for the professional growth plan and the integration with the stipend module. However, in the upcoming phases of launch, we are going to make it available so that individuals are actually able to submit an application if they want to become an advisor or have had experience throughout the state. So it will serve as a platform for individuals to be able to go in and search for a potential advisor. But obviously, there will be specific standards around who can become an advisor based on the qualifications and experience as well. So that is upcoming. We are also going to have a change in the statuses in the stipend module. So we've noticed that a lot of individuals have gotten confused at times if you've utilized the accepted status. So we're altogether going to be getting rid of the accepted status. And instead of that, we're going to have a status titled in review, which just makes more sense because then, you can move individuals to that status, and they'll be able to see, that their application is in review, but they won't be able to see any other information regarding their status until you actually fully approve them or deny them, or if they withdraw their application for any reason, if they're in a withdrawal status. And then there's also going to be some minor changes to the participant view from my stipend. So when they go to my application to see whatever application they have in file, there will be able to see additional information for that. So currently they're only able to see the status of their application. But then once you do make the changes to approved and denied, they'll be able to see some of those components, such as what did they get approved for, and if they were denied, they'll be able to see the reason there as well. Because currently they're only getting a notification if you allow the system to send it out, but now they'll be able to also just log in into their profile and see some of those details. Awesome. Is there any questions so far? I know I've kind of have just given you a whole bunch of information and a whole bunch of content. And if not, then I can just move on. But yeah, so in the setup, one of the main components that you'll be reviewing, I'm gonna go usually feature by feature. So it's gonna be the stipend program logo. So if you already have a logo updated, you don't have to really do anything with that, unless you maybe your programming has changed or you're adding an additional logo. Just be aware that you're only able to upload one image. So if you have more than one logo, you have to create one image with all of the logos for your program. The stipend program name, obviously, I don't foresee that changing for any of you. You would just have to update it if you have a brand new program. But usually, if you are launching a new program, I will have like an orientation with you separately to just kind of go over all of this so that you can continue to get familiar with the system. And then one thing to note for the stipend program name, and for any area of the setup where you're actually entering content yourself, there always is going to be three boxes, which is the three languages that the registry is currently translated to. So that would be English, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. You're not required to provide translations for your program content to either of the other two languages. But when you're doing the setup, you do have to ensure that there is content in all three of them. So if you're not providing the translations in Spanish or simplified Chinese, you do have to make sure that you've added the English content, just so that if you have participants that experience the registry in Spanish or simplified Chinese, when they log in to see your application, they won't see blank. So just something to keep in mind and something to note. But also before you launch, usually if you ask us, we will review your entire setup and provide you with notes just to make sure that you. The other thing is the stipend program contact information. I do get a lot of questions regarding this. This is the only section that you yourself are not able to edit. So for that one, you do have to contact me, and then soon to be our two professional development coordinators. They will be the ones supporting with making any changes. So if for any reason there's been any changes to your organization, that is the main administrator for the stipend program, and there's been any changes to your funding streams, all of that will be edited there. You don't have to worry about changing the funding streams until you're actually making allocations, but just as a best practice, I do recommend that when you're doing the setup, if you already know all the funding streams through which you're going to be providing your stipend awards, just let us know. We'll update them for you. Because then whatever you have selected on there is directly connected to where you make those allocations. And then once you've made allocations to where you'll see those amounts per funding stream in some of the reports. Um, the next thing, and this is, I would say, probably the most extensive content that you would enter into the registry, like in the boxes. It is the program description, and it is one of the components that the participant will actually be able to read and interact with when they're going into your application to submit. I usually recommend that you're pretty comprehensive with that. Some people, just have like a pretty simple blurb of what the program is. Other individuals have been a little bit more extensive. Based on the work that I've done with the stipend program here in the county of Los Angeles, I think that comprehensive is always better because it allows you to just, provide as much support to applicants and also to just kind of cover your basis of ensuring that all the information is available to them. So I usually recommend that you include an overview, the different pathways that you're providing stipends for, and if you're able to, maybe like a breakdown of what are the different components or activities and documents that they need to submit and complete for that stipend program. Any other eligibility requirements that you may have, any important deadlines for them to keep in mind, and then also the application statuses, because as I mentioned in the past, sometimes people will get confused between the difference when it comes to applied, accepted, and approved. Obviously, now with the in review change that we'll be doing soon, that will be a little bit more straightforward, but just something to keep in mind. And then I also usually always recommend to have contact information and have like a clear delineation between any programmatic question. So that would be you, who can they reach out to from your team to answer their questions about eligibility, about any items that they need to complete, and also adding our contact information if they need any support with technical assistance. So whether that be uploading documents, updating their profile, if they forgot their password and they don't know how to log in, maybe finding their employer so that they can update their employment record. Those are all things that we're usually able to support with. And then also including links to any resources that you may have. I do usually recommend that in the program description, you add links to things that they may need to complete. And also adding links to some of the resources that we have developed for all of you to utilize. We do have instruction sheets on how to submit an application step by step. And we also have a lot of video tutorials that you can find on our YouTube page, which also include the how to submit a stipend application, how to upload your documents, and how to link to your employer. And a lot of the counties that have implemented this usually have given pretty positive feedback in terms of participants, being able to navigate the system, learn it more, and just having an easier time when it comes to submitting their application. So just things to keep in mind. Um, this is an example of usually what I would recommend, or the way that I've set up the stipend program that I run in LA. I did create a resource for all of you. So if you click on the hyperlink, and then once we send the recording, I'll also send a copy of the slides so that you have access to all of these links. But you can click on this link and it'll send you directly to our resources where you will be able to download this as a Word document. And then you can edit that, especially if it's like a brand new program that you're launching, or if you want to just take any parts of it for this year or next year, you can go ahead and do that, including the parts where with the resources, because those are already linked for the videos particularly. Um, I usually also always recommend that you do all of your description in like a Word document and you put it on your SharePoint or your Google Docs. And then if you're editing, it's just so much easier to edit there and then copy and paste into the registry. That just kind of simplifies everything. And it also just ensures that you have a copy in your files. I've added this just so that you can know what the meanings of the different statuses are. Obviously, as I mentioned, the accepted, that's going to be completely scratched off once we do that development, and it'll just be in review. But usually applied, when an application isn't applied, that means that the applicant has submitted their application, and that's it. It doesn't mean that they're getting a stipend. It just means that they've submitted. Accepted usually means that they're not approved for a stipend program, um, but they may be eligible. They meet some of the eligibility criteria, depending on if you have any eligibility around, them receiving subsidy payment, or if there's like a percentage around that, or if they have appropriate job titles, etc., whatever the eligibility may be for your program. But it does not mean that they're approved or that they're getting a stipend. And usually that's where individuals were getting a little confused. If you utilize that, some counties do, some counties just go directly from applied to a final status, which would be approved or denied. But we usually recommend, like, if you used accepted, if individuals see that, if you don't suppress the email, people will get the email and be like, oh my God, I got approved. When am I going to get my money? And they'll start calling you, they'll start telling friends, and then you'll get bombarded with calls and emails. Um, The approved, that actually means that they've met the eligibility as well and that they've submitted everything that they needed to submit. And then directly from the approved, then you're able to make allocations, meaning that you're entering the approved data for what it is that you're approving them for and the amount of money that they're getting for their award. So, for example, if you approve somebody for college credit, you would be entering the data in terms of how many units you've approved them for and then the award amount. And then paid, obviously, that just means like you've entered that allocation, and that is the final status for anybody that has been approved. Denied usually just means that the applicant did not meet the eligibility requirements, and there's different reasons for you to deny everything from them not working at a site that is eligible to potentially also maybe not having submitted all of their documents, or there are some that are very specific to pathways as well. So maybe somebody signing up for professional development hours, but not actually completing the amount required for that. And then withdrawn, usually that has other reasons, which can be anything like if an individual submitted a duplicate application, you can just withdraw that duplicate application. Or if they have had something personal happen in their lives, maybe they're no longer working at a site that they were working at that was eligible, etc. Or if they've asked you to, you can just withdraw their application. And then usually, regardless of what status you switch their applications to, you're able to run reports for all of them or just based on a specific status. But we'll be covering that in our third webinar of the year. Um, and then there are some parameters around the switching of statuses, just something to keep in mind. So if you have switched someone to accepted, you are able to make an edit and switch them back to applied. However, if you've made a final status change to approved, denied, or withdrawn, you're not able to make that switch. So usually, for example, like, I don't know, something happened and you accidentally, denied someone, but you do want them to be in applied or accepted because you are reviewing their application, you can just send us an email and we can support with making that change. Is there any questions so far, or Stefania? No? Okay, awesome. The next component is the pathway goals. So the pathway goals are kind of just there to kind of give you additional information in terms of what the participant wants to essentially, complete or accomplish throughout the time of when they're completing the. Yes, Pamela.
Hi, yes. So going back to the application status, so once the participants receive the accepted, do they also get the definition or the meaning, like an email stating that? Okay.
No. So that's why I think there may have been confusion. And that's why I recommended that you added the definitions in the program description, just so that individuals, before they submit, they're able to get an idea. But usually, the way that people have essentially mitigated that issue has been by just suppressing the communication. Because whenever you make the status changes, you can actually suppress the email that automatically goes out from the registry so that they don't get any notification. And most counties, I would say, including us, only will send a communication at the very end once we have made final decisions. So individuals will just get an email once they've been fully approved or once they've been fully denied. Because if they get anything in between, once again, that will create that onslaught of messages and calls and all of that.
So the option to suppress it is still there. Plus, if there is missing documentation, let's say you review their application, whatever certifications they need to actually submit, and they might be missing one, that's just an email that as the account managers will have to send, right? Individually to that.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Thank
there
you.
is a feature which we usually cover in the second webinar of the year, where you're able to actually send an email to participants via their application regarding missing documents. They can't email you back, obviously, because we don't receive messages in the registry, but you can actually draft that communication when you go to the application status and then the individual's application. And there's like a whole section in the document section where you can click on select send email.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, so yeah, the pathway goals, that is the very first question that will actually show in the application from the participant's perspective. Um, and usually that is, like I mentioned, any goals that they want to accomplish. It could be directly related to the pathways that they're actually receiving money for, or it could not. It could just be to give you an idea. Somebody may be doing professional development hours, but maybe a goal that they have at some point that year is maybe to enroll in college classes and complete some college credit. So it's just there to kind of give you some additional information in terms of what individuals want to accomplish. But obviously now with the professional growth plan that will be directly integrated with the registry, individuals will be able to go more in depth in terms of what their short-term and long-term goals are. And then the difference between for that one, just heads up as well, they're only able to select, I believe, two in the actual application. Some counties will only select whatever is directly related to the pathway that they're giving money to. Some counties will just give a more extensive list so that individuals can select, regardless of whether it's directly related to the pathway or not. And then the actual pathway, that's what you're actually giving them money for. So that is the second list that is here. Um, and we have like very extensive stuff around obviously college credit, degree attainment, professional development hours, permits, reimbursement tuition, and other activities such as engaging in quality improvement activities, leadership, etc. So if at any point, also retention as well. So if at any point there's anything that you think maybe would be that you would request, you can let us know and we can see if that's something that can be added as well. And you also have the option of being able to have individuals submit more than one request. So the way that the system is set up, individuals can submit more than one application, but if during one period or 1 year, you're allowing individuals to apply for multiple different pathways. So say we have some counties that only do either or, like you're either doing professional development or college credit. We have some other counties that are actually doing multiple different things. So shout out to Kern. I know that you give your participants a lot of support with that. So, for example, not to put you on the spot, but just to use you as an example, they allow individuals to be able to do college credit, professional development, permits, and other things all at the same time. So they're able to select the amount of requests that an individual can submit in an application. So instead of having to submit, say, 5 separate applications at once, just within one application, they can submit the request for each one of those things. And then that supports in just kind of simplifying the administrator perspective so that when you're going in, you don't have to click multiple times back and forth to go to 5 different applications. You could just go to one application and see everything that that participant has requested. Yes, Stephanie, is there a question? And I'll try to be brief because we only have 23 minutes and still a lot of content to get through.
Yes, the question is, can the option of GAD completion be included in the stipend pathways?
Um, yeah, that's something that we can definitely bring up to Elise regarding that, and we can have a discussion. So if whoever put the question in the chat could just send me an email, that would be great for that suggestion, and then maybe just like how that is applicable to their stipend program. If that's something that they're implementing currently, then I can forward that to Elise, and then she could provide additional guidance whether that is something that we could do now or later on. Is there any follow-up question?
Um, yes. Well, I'm not sure if it's a question, but I'm gonna read it. Um, Judith put that you guys use the word pathways. Makes it super confusing when one of the stipend programs is literally pathways.
Oh yeah, so we have had discussions about that, but we usually, I know that just in general, like in the field and in the state, there's a lot of questions or terminology that gets utilized for a lot of different things, and I know that the word pathways gets utilized for so many different things. But we usually just have called it pathways. I believe because of how the workforce grant was written, and I think that's the terminology that they use. But at some point, we may be considering changing that, depending on other stuff, because there's other stuff within the registry that is also now pathway, like the pathway program, just something completely different. Um, so yeah. But I think at some point, maybe we'll host like a focus group for all administrators, just so that all the feedback can be provided, um, and any suggestions that maybe people have. But okay, I'm gonna move on. We'll save questions for the very end. So if anybody has like anything super pressing, then I can stay on like 10 minutes after or something so I can answer all of that, because we only have 20 minutes and there's still a lot. And I would like to go into the registry just in case anybody wants to actually see anything in there. So we also have application filters that you can select that essentially set parameters for who can actually submit an application and who cannot. One of them is employment verification. So that will not keep anybody from applying, but it usually will ask individuals to enter information for who their supervisor is, so that then they can get a notification that this person is going to get their employment verified in the registry. Um, but usually there's two ways in which counties tend to do that. So either if you're doing it in the registry, that has like its own separate process. And I know we've hosted webinars regarding that. So if you have any questions regarding how employment verification works in the registry, you can always let me know and I can connect you to operations. Oh, Rocio Martinez, our operations manager, is the person who oversees everything regarding employer admin access. But usually, whoever would be verifying employment would have to get this specific access granted. So they do have to go through a process of submitting an application. And then if they're a family childcare homeowner, they would submit a copy of their license so that then we can confirm that they in fact are the owner of that program. Because obviously by having employer admin access, they would have access to some sensitive data for their participants. And then they would be obviously having the ability to verify some of those details in their employment record. Usually, if it's like a center-based program, that requires a letter from the highest signatory in power. So if it's, for example, like a school district, and it's like centers ran by that school district, that letter would have to be signed by the assistant superintendent. If it's like a nonprofit that also oversees multiple programs, usually it would have to be the executive director or somebody who has the same level of signatory power. But like I mentioned, that is a total separate component. And we don't recommend that if it's your first year running it to just try to implement that, because that does take some level of strategy in terms of communication, and ensuring that some of those different sites are able to have the information needed to do that. So most counties will usually do like a progression. So maybe first year they'll implement an employment verification form. Second year they'll do a hybrid model in which they ahead of time try to communicate with people so that everybody has the access, because usually it can take anywhere in between a week to 2 weeks to get those that access process. It's fairly quickly if people submit all the documentation, but sometimes people may not get the letter signed by the correct person, so then that will delay the process. But yeah, usually that's what that process looks like. And then we have some counties that already have been implementing their stipend programs for multiple years. So they are in that phase where they're having employment verified completely in the registry. And when you're going in to see applications, you are able to see whether somebody has had their employment verified and the date from when it was verified. Um, there also are filters around how many hours an individual is required to work, like a minimum amount of hours, or a maximal level of income. Usually, if you select yes, they'll prompt open a box so that you can enter the number of hours or the number of income. And that will be dependent on what an individual has updated in their registry profile. So if they are eligible, but they're seeing a pop-up that lets them know they're not eligible, they usually just have to make sure that they're profile is fully updated, including their employment record. Because if somebody say has that they worked 5 hours for some reason in their employment record, but the minimum is like 15 or 20 hours, if they go and try to submit an application, the system will automatically say that they do not work the amount of hours required. Same for the level of income as well. There also are additional filters in terms of the county of employment, which primarily for all of you, you select your county unless you're implementing a stipend program that covers more than one county. So that's another point in which an individual would have to make sure that their profile is updated, because if they forgot to update it, or maybe they have it set as unemployed or as a student, the system will once again be like, no, you can't go in and submit an application unless you are linked to that site. If you ever have like a weird situation where you're providing a stipend to someone and they are eligible, but it's like a different type of stipend and they're like employed in a whole different county, you can always let me know and I can create the application on the back end support for that. But usually we do that for like a smaller, like if it's like one person, two people, etc. Obviously, if it's like 200 people or something like that, then we can just discuss how we can do that because submitting like 200 applications on the back end would be a lot. Um, and then next thing is obviously the job titles I already mentioned. So just we did have a couple people at the beginning of the fiscal year being like, hey, I have individuals that have been unable to submit because of their job titles. So then I routed them to here. So just make sure that that section of the filter is all updated and you've updated your employment title. So you do have to make sure that they're selected, meaning that you see the blue check boxes. If it's all like a clear box, then it means like you have no employment record selected. And then the funding streams, as of right now, they're there. We just recommend that you select all of them because we don't have verified data from the state for all sites. The only sites that we have verified data for in terms of their funding stream is any site that falls under QRIS or QCC. So then, unless you're only providing a stipend for QCC sites, then you would select everything. Or unless you have a very specific program where you have a very specific funding stream in which we've supported you with marking those sites on the back end for your specific program. Next thing would be the upload program materials. And for that, that is where you submit or upload a file that the individual, once they submit their application, will be able to see. So once they click submit, they're routed to another page with 3 steps. Submitted the application as number one. Number two is uploading their documents. And then number three, I believe, number two is downloading the supplemental forms, which would be whatever you upload here. Some counties will only upload the W-9, but you can create one document that contains everything that an individual is required to upload for you, whether that's like the W-9 professional growth plan and employment verification form. What we do for the stipend program that I run, I just created a cloud folder inbox. You could do it in Google Drive, make it public and just kind of put everything in there. And then create a checklist in which you link each of the items. I think that the checklist tends to be very helpful for participants because they can just download that, print that, or also save it, then download and click on each of the links, download all of the materials, and then they also have a guide to be able to check off like, okay, I completed this step, I completed the next one. And some of the counties that have also implemented that have shared that it's been very helpful for their participants. So that's another recommendation. And you can take a lot of the content from the program description if you did like the more comprehensive one to create some of those items in the checklist. And there is like a maximum for the file, just heads up. So we've had some individuals that have had issues with uploading their packet at times because it's been like a very long packet. So if that's the case, sometimes you just have to compress it. Next is the open period manager. So here's where you are able to select when your application is going to open and when it's going to close. Before it used to be on Eastern time. Now that has changed over to Pacific time. So usually whatever date you select, the application right at 12 in the morning will be open in the system. And whatever date you select for closing, that application will close at 11:59 p.m. You can select the period when you're doing that. If now you're doing more than one period, say that you're doing like 2 separate applications for fall and spring, once you close out the fall, then you can start working on updating for the spring and then select the dates for the spring. But you do have to update this twice if you're running 2 different periods within one fiscal year. Just heads up. And then the required documents, you can select those. These appear on the participant's perspective when they go to My Stipends, but also you're able to see it on your end when you see an application and you utilize it to select whatever individuals have already, uploaded and you've checked that off, and that will create notes that you can view as well on your end. I recommend, and you must do it, before you launch, just make sure that you clear the doc data. So usually you'll click on that, it'll say, do you want to clear it? It'll say yes, and it'll clear the boxes. And that will ensure that if you have any applicants that submitted an application the previous year, and now you're viewing their application for this year, you're not going to see the checkboxes checked. Because if you don't clear that, then you'll be seeing the checkboxes from the previous year. So just make sure that you clear that. If you already launched and didn't do that, just make sure that you go in and clear it. Literally takes a second. And then you're able to enable the question of whether you want participants to pick up the check or have it mailed to their profile. Pretty much everybody has it not enabled because you just mail checks, but that option is there. So that would automatically create like a fourth question in the application. And then the last part of the communication management or the setup is the communication management. So there's three things. There's the applied email, the statement of understanding, and the open period message. All of those will have the three boxes. So just make sure once again that you provide content in all three of them. If you're not providing translations for Spanish or simplified Chinese, make sure that you just copy and paste the English into all three of the boxes and then save. And you'll see that for most of them, there's like a hyperlink for suggested language that you can take and utilize. Most of you are fine because you already have drafted that language. If it's a brand new program, you can always take a look at that. But the applied email, you can suppress it if you want when you click on that, but that suppression will only suppress the applied email. I usually recommend that you don't do that because that's another section where you can enter important information, including your checklist. And the moment that somebody clicks submit application, they will get this message in their email address that is in their registry profile. But also in the registry, there's a section where they can see notifications, including messages that have gone out from the system. So that ensures that you cover your bases in the program description, supplemental forms, and the applied email. So that then if you have individuals letting you know, well, I didn't know, or didn't know that I needed to submit this or access these materials, you know that you've got that covered in three different places. The statement of understanding, that just is the very last part of the application, whatever you entered there. Usually it's language around, just because I'm submitting an application doesn't mean I'm getting an award. I have to complete XYZ activities, etc. And then the open period manager message is the message that individuals will see if they go to click on your application, but it's not open yet. So whatever you've entered there will create a pop-up with whatever content or language is there, which usually we recommend you adding something along the lines of like, hey, the application is not open yet, but come back at this time or this date. And if it's already closed, then I usually recommend application is already closed for this fiscal year. Come back around this time next fiscal year. If you're an applicant for this year, click on this link to access all the supplemental materials. And then that's where you would put the hyperlink for whatever cloud folder you've created with your W-9 professional growth plan, all of those sorts of things, employment verification form, if you decided to go down that route. So I'll skip the demo, just go in really quickly into best practices, and then I'll do the demo at the very end so that we can answer any specific questions as well. So I usually do recommend that you try to close out the previous fiscal year before opening up for the new year. If you still have applications from last year and already open, it will not affect your applications for the previous year. It just may make the closeout a little bit more complicated, but it's usually fine, and we can provide support with that. So just know that I do recommend that you close out everything already for last fiscal year, including making payment allocations and denying everybody in the system. If you haven't done that, please reach out to us and we will provide guidance, training, and support to be able to do that. That's also important because we also get a request at the end of the year from CDSS and the state in terms of individuals that have utilized the stipend module, how many individuals have submitted applications, etc. So we support with some of that reporting. So it's also very helpful to ensure that by the mid-September, everything is already closed out for the previous fiscal year. Because then we will reach out and then everybody will be stressed out. So yeah, just heads up. And then obviously recommend updating the program description if you want with all of the recommendations that I've mentioned, or at the very least with the resources and the links to those. Obviously, also having contact information for applicants to communicate with you. Sometimes we have had applicants call and inquire about eligibility, and we'll look through your setup or your materials to be able to answer as best as possible. But we always tend to just route to you because you're the experts when it comes to the content and the eligibility of your program. I do recommend creating that public folder in a cloud-based system so that you can have everything and individuals can always, access that, or you can just literally directly send individuals the link. Um, we found that very, very helpful. And then just in general, we always recommend that you have participants and use messaging about them uploading all their qualification information, permits, transcripts, PD, etc., because that will support in providing a baseline for the qualification data that they have, which supports with your end of year reporting, because you're able to see where people started if you downloaded a report like at the very beginning when they submit applications, and then a report at the very end, and it allows you to be able to get that picture of what individuals were able to accomplish or how did they grow in their qualifications. So just the best practice, always download those reports and save for your records. And then I'll try to do the demo really quickly for the applicant's perspective as well. And uploading documents. So yeah, for processing applications, I do recommend just having a clear understanding of the difference between employment verification and employer admin access, because sometimes if you've communicated with individuals that they need their employment verified in the registry, they think that they have to submit a request to get employer admin access, when in reality it's only the person at their site that needs that access. Also creating a workflow plan, especially if you have more than one stipend administrator, that's always helpful. As you're doing applications, I do recommend always running reports, doing some conditional formatting on the registry IDs, and then looking at the pathways to ensure that individuals don't have duplicate requests. Because even if you have the filter for individuals to not submit a duplicate request, if they go back and forth in the system, that could potentially result in a duplicate request. So I usually recommend that, and then you can either withdraw those or reach out to us and we can delete them on the back end. The applicant's report is very helpful to create a project management tool so that you can keep track of a lot of different things and things that individuals have submitted. So that's always very helpful, but I'll cover that more in depth in the second webinar of the year. And then I also recommend for any of the other components, you can always review the previous webinars where we covered some of this content. They are on our YouTube page, and now we also have those administrator videos. There is going to be a second edition of the stipend module user guide coming up, so I'll be sending that out once it's fully published. And then the support is going to be split now between our two professional development coordinators. So at some point in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be sending out a communication to all of you so that you know who specifically is your point of contact for your county. So you're all going to be assigned, or your program is going to be assigned to a specific professional development coordinator, who will be the person that you can go to for all questions related to stipend module and also training calendar. And then obviously we'll have 2 more webinars this fiscal year, one to cover everything regarding processing applications, best practices, tools available, and then end of year closing out, downloading the reports, etc. Here are all the resources for the administrators, the prep document if you're launching a new program, user guide, what to include in your program description, the videos for individuals on how to apply. We have that currently in English and Spanish. We also have a video help sheet, so it's essentially like an instructions sheet. And then our resource website, which you can always share with people. And now, like I mentioned, for stipend administrators, we have a total of 3 videos. So we have a video on how to process applications. It's like 5 minutes. They're all within 5 to 7 minutes, and they like actually go with you step by step. So I recommend that you check them out. Support with getting our YouTube views up. Subscribe if you want. Very considerate, very demure. And then next thing is the batch processing. So if you're processing applications, you can actually do so in batches as well. So there's a tutorial for that. And everything is hyperlinked here, so you'll be able to access that. But also, if you just go to our YouTube page, if you click on playlists, you'll be able to see everything split up in playlists. Even for individual participants, we have playlists in Spanish, English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. So all of that is available, and we have the Stipend Administrator Hub playlist where all these videos are available. And the last one is actually making the stipend funding allocation. So that's once you've approved people, the process to actually make the funding allocations either by individual application or by importing a spreadsheet. So yeah, registry support. Here are all the ways in which your participants can get a hold of us. And if you need support as a stipend administrator, you can send me an email. And then obviously, once you know who is assigned to your county and your program, you have the contact information for either Christy or Melanie, who are the other two professional development coordinators. And you can also give us a follow on Facebook or LinkedIn, which I know most of you are probably more active on LinkedIn, so that you can keep up with some of the different registry news. So now I can go over any questions that you may have. We have literally 1 minute and I talked a lot, but I can still go in and do a demo if anybody wants to very, very quickly. Just let me know. But yeah, is there any questions? Oh my God, Elise
Yeah,
is here. I did not know that this entire time.
yeah. There's three questions on the chat. So one of them is there a test website that we can use for training purposes?
So no, there is no test website. We don't always recommend this, but you can make a test account if you'd like. But you just have to be very clear in the name. It needs to have like test in it because usually when we're running data, we have to clean it up before, our database administrator or Elise does anything with it. So having test in the name is helpful in being able to get rid of those test accounts for accurate data. But that would require obviously for you to make a test email, whether you go to Google or whatever, and then you can create that account to be able to do that. And it can support with any other things that you may be testing if you're, utilizing any other features. But yeah, just make sure that it has tests in it. So if it's like, I don't know, Alameda County test, something along those lines.
Okay, and then
Yeah, and next question.
okay, if a participant applies twice because they forgot to include a stipend in their initial application, is there a way to combine both stipends in the initial application?
Yeah, so if that happens, what you can do is you can communicate with them to go in and edit their stipend request. So I'll go ahead and share my screen really quickly. The only thing that you have to know is that in order for individuals to do that, they have to obviously go to stipend and pathways. Then they would go to my stipends. And when they go to my stipends, they'll be able to see all the requests that they have on file. If the application is in applied status, they can actually edit it by clicking on the edit icon. And once they do that, that will automatically take them to an editable version. So then they can add that additional request. However, if you have already switched their application to approved or denied, you would have to let us know on our end. And then we can either just add the request for you on the back end. You would just have to let us know the information. So for example, if it's a college credit or something, you would have to let us know the college that they're attending, their ID, the amount of units that they're planning on completing, and whether it's semester based. Which if you refer to the user guide, there is a whole table with all the pathways that essentially goes over the data that the system will request for each of the pathways. So something to reference. Or we can just switch the application back to applied so that then you can let the participant know, hey, your application is editable now. You can go in, go to my stipends and pathways, my stipends, edit, and then that's good to go.
Okay, one more question. Do you have dates for the other two webinars?
So I don't yet, but usually we host the second webinar around September. I may try to do it a little bit earlier, probably maybe like November, like mid-November, I'm hoping for. And usually the end of year for that one, we tend to host it usually around May, like beginning of May, because all of you are kind of prepping around that time to close out. But I may also try to just bump that up to April just so that everybody can have all the tools needed as you're kind of closing out and stuff. And if you do have any situation where you are doing 2 different periods, you can just reach out to us separately and we can schedule some training time as well to guide you if you're closing out fall applications and you're opening up for spring. And I don't think we have enough time for a full demo, so you can always refer back to our previous webinars, or you could just schedule some time with us and we can support you with them. But yeah, is there any other specific questions? Now is the perfect time. And I think, Stephanie, at this point, you can stop recording. So thank you, everybody.